Yep.
This is the book. Doesn't look like this, but this is the book.
All right, you're live.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening if you happen to be in Switzerland, where our author today, Donna Leon, is residing. I was just saying that sadly, this is my advanced reading copy, and I can't show you the artwork, but Jacob will come back and show you the US cover. And I noticed, Donna, when I went to look it up, that the British cover is dramatically different than the American cover.
Yeah, everybody puts a different cover on the books. All of the other, to the best of my knowledge, because I sometimes I'm in places where there are bookstores and I look, and sometimes I see my book and the cover is always different.
But they do hold on to the title, at least the two English speaking.
Yeah, the two English speakers do, but they take, some of them take liberties. In the languages I can read, things are reasonable. But when I get to finish, I'm not sure what they're selling.
So Donna, like me, is a serious opera fan, and I'd like to think that her impeccable Italian, which I've never heard, but I'm going to assume it's impeccable Italian, probably comes from lifelong immersion in Italian operas. Would that be true?
Well, since I was perhaps in my 20s, yeah.
Okay.
Immersion, sort of immersion. In fact, sorry, I'm in Zurich now, and tomorrow night I see Cecilia sing Cenerentola, that she's been singing for 30 years.
True. I saw her in the Met staging, which I thought was really tragic because they updated it to like a pizza parlor with red check tablecloths and the whole bit. And, you know, I'm sorry, but I really think that period opera, I mean, opera set in other eras, often doesn't translate well to a contemporary setting.
No, I just saw Roberta Devereux here, and I think it's a very difficult decision for the stage creator to find some way to make it current when it's not. And do you change the clothing? Do you change this? Do you change the background? Do you change everything? Do you put it on the moon?
Yeah,
I
right.
saw in of all places, Halle. Last year, I saw an Orlando. And I later asked them if I could write a piece for their program because it's so good. And I titled it something like Orlando is a nutcase. Because in this one, Orlando, who in the past, he goes mad. In the opera, he goes mad. But in this production in Halle, he really goes mad. He becomes a serial killer. It was wonderful, and it worked. It was modern. They had televisions and hair dryers, but it was splendid. And it's what the production, I would say, that I've seen that best manages to make it relevant to today.
Well, we brought this up in part because if you recall, Donna's first Commissario Guido Bernetti, Death at La Fenice, in fact, has a lot to do with Venice's famous opera house, which subsequently burned down and has been rebuilt to my sorrow, because I really would like to have attended it in its old form. What do you think of the new one?
It works. It's acoustically, it's good, and it's now about 15 years old. And so it's acquired a little bit of patina to make it look older than it is.
Right. Are you ever tempted to set another book within the world of opera?
No, because I've done it twice. I did it with Aqua Alta as well.
Right.
And the fact that I love opera, at this point, a more and more limited range of Baroque opera, doesn't mean that other people do. When I think of those people who write murder mysteries always about food or about the book trade or about being a carpenter, and I think that gets old real fast. And I don't know that all readers want to dive into the world of the opera again.
I think that's a very wise thought on your part. So Shall You Reap is the book we're going to talk about. But I just want to mention before we do that for those of you who get our e-news, I showed you the cover of Donna's forthcoming memoir in September. I have to say that I have really great red jacket envy, Donna. That is the most gorgeous. Wow.
Yeah,
So,
people aren't supposed to say this, but that is a cool photo.
ah, well,
Yeah.
it does, it's gorgeous on you. And I'm assuming that is part of your memoir. You will, in fact, talk about the world of opera because, I mean, you not only watch it, but you actually sponsor, singers and so forth. So it's a major part of your life.
Yeah, it is. It takes up a lot of my time. It takes up a lot of my thinking work time. And I spend a lot of time traveling to and from the opera
Right,
and
which is,
to concerts as well.
well, and you live in a place where that's easy enough to do. So that works.
Yes.
By
Yes.
American standards. I was hoping that you could see because I'm in my library and I don't know if you can really tell, but let me hold this up. My collection of your entire oeuvre, is right. Can you see them all?
Right
lined up
there,
on the shelf?
yeah. Wow.
Yep.
I've been busy, haven't I?
You have been busy. We've followed your career path here together ever since La Fenice. And I still remember taking you to tea at Fortnum and Mason in London after you won the Silver Dagger, which was a highlight. Unfortunately, they don't even give the Silver Dagger anymore. So brava that you have one.
Oh, well, I snatched up one of the last, I guess.
I think you did. The silver, there's the British Crime Writers Association, their version of the Edgar Allan Poe Awards or the other major mystery awards are daggers, which I sort of like. There's a Cartier diamond dagger.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, right, exactly. But the gold dagger is for best novel, and for a while they had a silver dagger that was for the other best novel. But then I think they traded it in for the Ian Fleming steel dagger.
No.
So anyway, Donna
Yes,
won that.
yes
I
or no?
was
Are
in
you
London.
kidding?
Yeah.
Sometimes don't know when you're kidding or not.
No, I'm serious. They did trade it in for the Ian Fleming steel dagger, which is given for the best thriller. I think as thrillers have become a more dominant form, they decided that they would have a separate dagger to recognize that rather than the silver dagger. So, best mystery and then best thriller, making a distinction, although I think that's extremely hard to do.
Do you interest yourself with both, or do you stick to mysteries?
Oh, we do both. And then, we have tons of unclassifiable. I mean, we were at Clive Cussler's own bookstore at That's Adventure. We're the Outlander bookstore. You can't even classify Diana's Outlander books. So we have a very broad range. We haven't been a mystery bookstore for years. I only started that way because at the time in 1989, Donna, Barnes & Noble really was the major bookseller. And I realized that trying to do a Barnes & Noble miniature was going to be unsuccessful and that I needed a specialty. And I knew mystery, and my mother, who was alive then and who lives here, really loved mystery. So in part, I opened a mystery bookstore for her. But there were, I think, about 30 mystery specialist bookstores back then. And now there's just a tiny number of us. And I've been unbranding us as a mystery bookstore for years. We do fiction, lots of historical fiction. It's a very broad umbrella anyway. If you read in the crime genre, it's a very, very large umbrella that you can put many things into.
Now I see them everywhere.
Right.
It's what people read maybe the most.
I think so. And the other part that I find really heartening is that basically it's an American and a British form to originally, but now, almost every country, well, not every country, a huge number of countries have their own native mystery writers and, mystery plots. We've had Scandinavian noir, we're having an Australian crime wave. You can read books from all over the world. And so I think that's why you're seeing so much more of it, is because there is so much more of it.
And the Italians have started writing it.
Yeah, no, they have. And
some of them are very, very good.
Are your books published in Italian? I've never even asked you that.
No.
How interesting. They don't like the fact that you're not Italian.
No. Well, I think that might be true. I've been asked a number of times if I would permit the books to be printed and published and sold in Italy. but I had two bad experiences with people whom I knew reasonably well, who sort of jumped on me one day, both in the course of 2 days, complaining and saying how terrible it was that I, who had been treated so well by Italy, which is certainly true, wrote terrible books saying how bad Italy was and how corrupt Italy was. And I said, well, what book are you talking about? And it turned out that they hadn't read the books, but they had read an article in the newspaper, Il Tempo, the one from Torino. And it said that there was an American, i.e. foreigner, saying bad things or showing bad things about Italy, the corruption, the crime. And they jumped on me for that. And they were really vociferous, and I could understand them because I am not Italian. And even after 50 years away from the States, when I hear people grumble about the States and say the same thing I say, it's different to these ears. And it's that same idea that I can beat my wife, but you can't.
How interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I guess
I'm sure that would happen. Because Italians don't read, but they follow popular culture. So a lot of people would learn about these books and learn that someone who is not Italian, and it wouldn't matter if I were Lithuanian or South African, I'm not Italian. And so there would be a sense of unease on their part that someone who is not Italian says these things about Italy. So I don't want that.
No, I can see why you wouldn't. But taking that one step farther, I think it's interesting that the TV adaptations of your books are made by a German company. And actually, we watched an Irish crime that is being made by a German company, and Martin Walker's amazing French books with Bruno, the chef, de police, are also filmed by German companies. And, it's a little disconcerting, I think. I never could quite, especially Patti, the German actor just never felt, like he was reasonable.
Well, I saw one of them, and that was enough. That sufficed. And luckily, I don't have a television, so I couldn't watch them anyway. I couldn't make it a matter of principle. I didn't have the means to do it.
Well, I mean, one could wonder why it wasn't an Italian production, but now perhaps you've explained that. Anyway, we digress because we're actually here to talk about So Shall You Reap, which has many interesting themes in it. One of the things I really loved is that for years, we know that Guido Brunetti's wife, Paola, who's a professor, is a serious reader, serious student of literature, has a library. And we know that then he dips in and out of books because we see him often doing that. But in this one, you open it up and he's deeply engaged in calling his own personal library. Is that... Did you run out of shelf space and decide that was a really good plan?
Yeah. No, I moved. And moving is worse because if you can keep them all in the same house, you can stick them in the attic or you can stick them in the cellar. Well, you can't do that in Venice, but you can in other cities. But I moved. And so I had to decide who was coming with mommy and who wasn't. And instead of getting myself in the knot of agony, I just said, well, if I change my mind, I can buy another copy. If 7 years from now, I say that I must have my Don Quixote back, because now I finally want to read it, I could just buy another copy. So I was merciless. I did the same with the CDs. I got rid of, when I moved from Venice, I did a cull. And it was a cull.
I admire your resolution and so forth. My problem is that all of these books surrounding me would be very difficult to give up because most of them have personal messages in them and so forth. And so I can't buy them again, So I was actually going through to try to do a little culling myself. But you also, how does Guido organize his library? Because that's something that you have him doing that I don't recall seeing before. And that was sort of fun, the way you described it.
Well, he has 3 shelves, I think, 3 or 4 shelves, that's all. So imagine if you had to reduce yours to 4 shelves. What would you keep? What would you jettison? It's difficult. But it's probably a wise thing to do. A number of my friends have done the same thing, have gotten rid of the CDs and have gotten rid of a lot of the books because we know that distinction that I make in the beginning of the book about books you've read, books you want to read again, books you buy that you know you are not going to read. I find that such a fascinating phenomenon. I was just in London for a week, my one time in the year when I can buy books in English. And I went on a feeding frenzy. I did. Because I have a deal with my publisher that they will send them all back. They will find a box and send me my books. And so I went a little bit crazy, even though here I'm running out of space. But sooner or later, luckily, I have a lot of friends here who have a similar dilemma, that they are English readers, whether or not they're English speakers predominantly. Some of them are Germans, but who prefer to read in English. They prefer to read English books in English. And so every year I do a call and fill a shopping bag and give them to two friends who prefer to read in English. So that lightens my load every year. But I'm going to have to do one soon.
Wow. I
I'm
truly
giving them.
admire your resolution here, but I don't think I'm going to follow it anytime.
No, but you can, because your
Yeah.
situation is different.
Yeah, it is different. That's true. Although I did look for a few books that didn't have personal messages to donate to the bookstore recently. So Paola, who, obviously is the person who truly loves literature, has more shelves. And I'm not sure whether I consider that to be a fair trade. But, over the years, one of the things that I've loved about the books is the way that they try to fit into the whole family, a Venetian apartment, which is not enormously spacious. Paola, Guido, the two children. At one point, do I remember his mother lived with them or lived nearby? I can't remember which.
No, they've never had anyone living.
Okay, so it's the four of them. But Paola comes from a noble family, which has a palazzo. So the Falieris have a different lifestyle. And another theme in the book, which I've enjoyed, is the way that Guido and Paola's parents have gradually become closer. Although it seems to me that it's been more Guido than the Falieris than have, he was less comfortable with them than them with him. Does that seem right?
Yeah.
Because he comes from a working class background, right? So he had sort of a little bit of a chip.
He has a memory of what it was like to be poor, because they were dirt poor when he was growing up. And it colors the way he looks at wealth and colors the way he looks at the aristocracy, with which he's not a member of the aristocracy, but certainly he's going to be when and if the Falieris die, he is going to be a wealthy person, or certainly his wife is going to be a wealthy person. But he's not really interested in that. Apparently he doesn't think about it at all. It's going to happen, but he doesn't. He's not in it for the money. He didn't marry her because she was. No,
obviously not. And she was okay marrying him outside her own class. So, I think it was not just a physical attraction, but a mental attraction that brought them together.
Absolutely.
And they raised their children, not to be rich.
Yeah. I think they seem to be doing a good job of raising the kids. They aren't in jail. They aren't addicted to anything.
No, it's been, part of the continuing joy of a long series is to watch the characters as they move along. The children grow up, some, older people die, and then there's the whole office thing. And so one of the things that happens at the office in this book that begins is that, you tell, what does the Spectre Vianello comes to Guido with a phone call?
Well, he's got news that one of the officers was out in Mestre on a weekend on his day off, dressed in his civilian clothes. And he was in a protest and he got busted. And the phone call came that said, we've arrested one of your men. We've arrested one of your policemen. And so they sense it's someone that they like. They go out to Mestre to find out what is going on and what this officer did. Did he mug someone? Did he steal something? Was he shoplifting? And until they get there, they have no idea of his crime. And come to find out it's not a crime. He's been in a protest, and there was some contention, and someone got whacked with a big placard, and he got dragged into the what is the word for it? Into the not the slammer, but he's dragged into the police headquarters, and they, when they find out that he's a cop, they realize that they've created a potentially very embarrassing situation. So that has to be sorted out.
So it was the gay pride parade from which they learned something about their colleague that had not come to their attention before.
Yeah.
He's a lovely man.
Yeah, he is. He's a nice guy. I come to like these secondary characters more and more. And I find that aside from my affection for them, I am finding uses for them. Pata is just so useful for showing human folly and human arrogance and human hubris and human this and that. I adore him. I'm perhaps the only person on the planet who does adore him, but I find him so useful. And I jump to his defense often. Because he's not a bad guy.
He's not really a bad person. He's pompous, he's shallow, he's a whole lot of things, but he's not actually evil.
No. There's never been, no one ever complains and says, well, he's in the pocket of the mafia, or he's been taking bribes about this. Nothing. There's never been even a hint of incorrect behavior on his part. But nobody can stand him because of his ego.
Yeah, but he's a suck up to power, and that means that he doesn't really protect his men or his stations. So Signorina Elettra is remarkably useful, possibly the most useful person in doing some workarounds.
Yeah, she's very, very clever. And I don't know half of the time how she does what she does, because I just ask her to find out this about that, and she's off like a bloodhound until she drags it home and drops it at my bloody thing at my feet. I'm now, she's in the middle of doing something terribly terrible. Oh yeah, she's broken into, in the new book, the book for next year, she has broken into the Carabinieri, and she has Brunetti very upset because she said at one point when he asked her to get information about the Carabinieri, she said, oh, Signore, that's very, very difficult. They are very, very well protected, but I'll give it a try. No, I know what I'll do. I have a friend in Caltanissetta, and I'll ask him. And Brunetti blanches because Caltanissetta is either Sodom or Gomorrah. Take your choice. It's the chief mafia city in Italy. So she's got a friend somewhere in the middle of the mafia organization. And because this is a special request, she's going to have to ask the mafia for help. Maybe, but it doesn't mean that. It's just that the person works or lives in Caltanissetta. You can live in Sodom and not be a sodomite, I suppose.
Well, that's an excellent point. I like her because she's she is able to tunnel her way through the Italian bureaucracies, and she also understands the way they work in a way that Brunetti really, in some ways, is quite naive about it. Maybe intentionally so, because he's really focused on solving crimes rather than the political aspects of his job. But so he needs her, to not just do all that investigating, but she kind of pilots him along.
A couple of years ago, I was in Naples. I was staying with the parents of a very, very good friend of mine. The mother, Giulia, had been the assessore di Belle Arti. She was the the city minister in charge of museums and libraries of art. And she retired. But 2 years after she retired, we went to Naples with her. And so we get to places. There were 3 of us traveling. And the person at the door would say, I'm sorry, the museum is closed today. And Julia would say, oh, why? And the person at the desk, who didn't know who she was, would say, oh, Signora, we have a special delegation here and we have to close. So she said, oh, that's very interesting. So Julia would just, in front of the person in the desk, pick up her telephone and dial a number and say in Napolitano, not in Italy, but in Italian, not in Napolitano, ciao, Ruggero. And she talked to Ruggero, who was the official president of the library. And she would say in Napolitano, I'm standing here in front of your library. Yeah, I thought it would be open today. No. They told me it's closed. There's some sort of delegation coming in. No, that's what they told me. It's closed. I've tried to get in. I've been here for half an hour. Yeah, okay, I'll give her the phone. Hold on. She handed the phone to the woman who was she was just trembling. Sì, dottore. Sì, immediatamente, dottore. Sì. And she put the phone, said, prego, signora, prego. We got into the museum. And then to make things even better, she went up into the stacks and brought down treasures, the 1427 edition of and the 1512 edition of, and she would leave them on the table and go up into the stacks because the library was closed. Go up into the stacks and bring down 1612 Manuzzia's edition of. It was just so wild. And for the time that we were in Naples, that's the kind of treatment that we had. And that's the kind of treatment that we will always have in Naples, because that's how things work. And so you know.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say it's not who you are, but who you know that is so often the gateway to things. Naples looks to me, there's a really, and I'm going completely blank, but there's been an excellent crime drama set in Naples, 3 or 4 seasons by now. I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, the views of Naples, the buildings and so forth are just extraordinary. And, even people of modest means seem to live in these perfectly palatial quarters, with 20-foot ceilings and, all kinds of magnificence around them, which I guess is left over from, when it was an independent kingdom and for 3 centuries back. But my husband and I are thinking about going to Sicily in January. And I said to him, if we're going to do that, we are going to go to Naples because, we've admired it so much looking at that. But one of the things I think that's wonderful about international crime dramas is, as shown on the screen, is the photography gives you a chance to be a tourist. I mean, however I felt about the Germans in Venice acting out your books, Venice itself was wonderful and still Italian.
Yeah, and still Italian and beautiful. And I think that is one of the attractions of European crime fiction visually, because the cities are so beautiful.
Yeah.
I forget where I was, Milwaukee, then my last book tour I went to, no. It was St. Louis. There was a murder in St. Louis, because I read The Guardian and the New York Times every day. There was a murder in St. Louis maybe 3 weeks ago. There was a homeless person, and someone got his gun and walked up to the homeless person whom he did not know and just shot him in the back of the head and killed him just because he felt like it. But what struck me equally was this was the center of downtown St. Louis, and it was empty. There was no one there. And what I saw in my last trip suggested to me that the centers of many American big cities are empty. For anyone, I don't know what the reasons are, but it was this St. Louis photograph was shocking, because there was not a single person in the street.
Well, there are many reasons. The pandemic accelerated it, and now, the tide is turning around a bit. But I mean, a lot of it, was white flight to suburbs. A lot of it was the cost of accommodation was so high. A lot of it was they became filled in with offices instead of residences. And we're having a very hard time in Arizona balancing out, accommodations for the enormous number of people that relocated here during the pandemic. The growth rate was just astronomical. But, it's a constant problem. New York, remember, is a city where every neighborhoods keep going up and down. I mean, you didn't know her probably, but there was a wonderful editor for many years called Sarah Ann Freed. She was a very dear friend and died 20 years ago. But her husband was a developer and he bought into Soho when it was crime-ridden and horrible and nobody went south of Houston, i.e., south of Houston. So Soho. And then it rose up and became gentrified and incredibly expensive and everybody wanted to live there and all. And now, it's cycling back down as another neighborhood cycles up. And I don't know that European cities have that same kind of cyclical, I really don't know enough about it, but they're more residential, I think.
Yeah, the cities are much more residential.
They've also been better about banishing cars. I mean, I can remember my last visit to Antwerp. There's whole swaths of Antwerp where there are no automobile traffic at all. So many European cities have made it friendlier for people to be downtown as a walking thing. They're also smaller. I mean, the geographic Phoenix now is bigger geographically than Los Angeles. I mean, it's hundreds of miles and we have no public transportation. It's too hot to walk. And so, it has an entirely different ambience than, Florence, for example, or Naples. I mean, Venice has its own, which is one of the things that you bring out so well in your books. So it's not typical because of the water and the canals and all the rest of it. But, it's just different. We all get used to where we live, right?
In most European cities, you can walk.
Or bicycle. Yeah.
Or bicycle to where you want to go.
Right. So let's talk about the Tamil Tigers, because I actually, there's some really interesting aspects to this book. We've talked about the fact that Guido and his books and how he organizes them in his library is interesting. Guido has an encounter with his father-in-law, and I really like the fact that they have gained greater closeness, greater respect for each other. At some point, if you go on writing it, maybe at some point the Falieri's will die. And Guido will have to face up to, he and Paola, what they want to do about the Falieri and all the rest of it. But anyway, another theme here has to do with immigrants, whether legal or in this case, the Tamil guy is, I assume, legal. Can't remember. He is legal, isn't he? No, he's not. All right. So Italy has had, to confront illegal immigration in all kinds of ways, it being so much closer to Asia and North Africa because of the water. So there's this lovely man who from Sri Lanka, formerly Ceylon. Was Ceylon the French name when was Ceylon a French colony?
Oh, it was English. It was an English colony.
Was it?
The Indian Peninsula and beyond.
It's just Ceylon doesn't sound British, but in any case, formerly Ceylon and now Sri Lanka. And the Tamil Tigers formed in 1976 and fought this really bloody war for control of Sri Lanka for, I think it was like 26 years before the Sri Lanka military finally beat them. So did your lovely man come to Venice as a war refugee?
Probably. Or he's got a wife and kids in Sri Lanka, but there's no work. He had no future. And so he somehow managed to get to Italy and somehow managed to get a job with a family. And it's a good job. It keeps him out of the public eye.
Right.
Because if he's stopped in some sort of control by the police, they might discover and might act on his being an illegal immigrant.
Right. If I see myself in my own review, I mentioned he was an undocumented immigrant, but apparently I let that slip my mind. But anyway, he lives on a kind of private estate, which is next to a convent. And I have to say that I really thought your writing about the convent and the sisters that live there, particularly Spar Benedetta, was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and his relationship, he's a Buddhist. He's a practicing Buddhist, this little man, who is sadly the victim. But he was very close to Suor Benedetta. And I just thought that their relationship, their friendship, and was very moving. So
Thank you. So did I, because they were two very, very good, spiritually minded people.
mhm.
And I think that was probably the bond between them, that they both recognized the importance of the spirit world.
And
Whether
then,
it exists or it doesn't exist, they recognized its importance.
absolutely. And as a mirror sort of to the activity of the Tamil Tigers, there were some violent leftist politics in Italy in the 1980s, which also play into this. And it throws Guido back into reminiscing about his own school days, doesn't it? So it's another kind of flashback to his past.
Yeah, but I think this is something that's quite common, regardless of the country in which you live. When we were younger, when we were at university, our political and our social and our economic ideas, I believe, were different from what they are now. People become more cautious as they get older because they're weaker. And I think this is one of the reasons that authoritarian systems appeal to older people, because they promise to protect. And as one gets older, I don't know whether you'd agree or not, old people very often are protected by their wealth, but that lacking, they are fair game. We're weaker, we're smaller. And so we want more, many people want more protection.
Or maybe we just want, maybe we just want things to stay the same because it's harder to be flexible. We're physically, as I'm hobbling around on my broken foot and so forth, I'm thinking, I'm not really as inclined. I was out to dinner with our children last night, our youngest daughter and her husband, and they'd been to the rodeo, they'd been to a Jimmy Buffett conference, concert, they'd done this, they'd done that, and they are so active. And I sat there thinking, I can remember that, but at the moment I can't actually do that. And so, yeah, I think our physical limitations come in, but also, we have to come to terms with the past. And I think that's an important theme in this book is, how well people do come to terms with their past, with the past, not necessarily their own. So, there's a kind of meditation on aging that is part of the book. You have a lot of ingredients in this.
Yeah, I like this. I like this book a lot. I'm not supposed to say things like that, but I like it.
Why not? I say that, so you're certainly allowed to. Yeah, it's really fascinating, to and to see how they kind of all work together, that we've already touched on, the gay pride parade, we've touched upon the undocumented immigrant, we've touched upon politics in both Sri Lanka and Italy, we've talked about books in Guido's family. There's just a very rich sort of cappuccino here. Or no, Chilpino, sorry, not coffee, but the fish stew, right? So did you write this during the pandemic? Did you write this when you were not out as much?
I would have written it a year ago. No, the pandemic had come to an end. I think I spent the pandemic. I had a lot of time to read during the pandemic because all other,
right.
I could either write a book or I could go out and walk. But I had a lot of time during the pandemic to write. I wasn't rushed at all. I didn't need a deadline because I didn't have anything else to do. I couldn't go anywhere. And so
I just wondered if the complexity of the book might have reflected the fact that you had a lot of leisure, time to conceive of it.
But I've slowed down in that in the last year or so, I've decided to start saying, no, I don't want to do that. I have invitations, a lot of invitations to go to places that I want to go to. on book tours because I have a couple of favorite publishers, not aside from the ones in English. And I always have fun when I go there. The main ones are Spain and Finland. Usually the Finns just have to call and I say, yeah, all right, put me on a plane. But I just turn them down because I'm traveling a lot for music in the next couple of months. And I just have to be a little bit moderate in what I do. I feel the same that I felt all of my life. But I guess I don't have the patience anymore to sit on a train.
Well, I think we're all conscious of the fact as we grow older that our time is more precious to us because it's growing more limited.
Yes.
And things that we would have taken on when time seemed infinite, and a constantly renewable resource. I think we do become more selfish with our allocation of time, recognizing that it's more precious than it once was.
Yeah, I think we should.
So are you keeping to the same writing schedule? I mean, you've published a book a year and sometimes more than one the entire time I've known you.
Yeah, but it's an unconscious thing. And I don't know when the year ends. I don't know when I'm supposed to have the manuscript ready and no one's told me. So I just keep plodding along with it. I come as you do, of the generation of people who were told you do your homework first and then you go out and play. So I'm very, what the Italians call doverosa. I'm very much tied to duty, to dovere, to the thing you must do. And I can't break that.
Well, I think that we're used to a more structured life, that we grew up that way, where we did have expectations made of us and deadlines and so forth. And, we're used to structure. I'm really interested in my son-in-law, for example, must be on his maybe fifth job since I've known him. He works in cybersecurity in the tech world, and they seem to, revolve in and out in a way that when I was young, nobody would have considered you,
we got jobs and we kept jobs, and that was it.
Right.
You worked for Westinghouse for 40 years.
And I think that the current way is better, probably.
Me too.
But at the same time, I do think that those of us who are older, I'm really a child of the 1950s. My husband's a child of the 1960s. He's younger than I am, and he's in many ways closer to my children, in terms of cultural and other expectations than I am. The 50s were a particularly rigid, decade when it all exploded. When I was at Stanford, I got there in 1958 to San Francisco, and it was a very cosmopolitan, very structured, very kind of old-fashioned city. And in 1963, when I left with my degrees, it was Haight-Ashbury, and it had been an absolute revolution in a 5-year time. It's just remarkable how things turned. So the 60s are dramatically different than the 50s. The schism was tremendous.
What were your degrees in?
I was a French and political science major as an undergraduate. I have a master's degree in library science, and then I read the law. I can't practice in Arizona because if you read the law in one state, you can't take the bar exam in other states unless you actually go to law school. So, all of that. And I have a master's degree in history too. I forgot that one, right, from Northwestern.
Nice.
So, actually, in the end of all the different things that I've done, whether I was a librarian or a scholar or a lawyer, I actually love book selling. It allows me to, publishing and book selling kind of brings all those things together in an interesting way. And I'm not, people are always asking me why I don't write a book. And my mind doesn't work that way. I'm really, I'm great at reviewing and organizing and editing and so forth, but I don't have that inner voice, that you have that makes you a novelist.
Yeah, people, either they can or they can't. And I'm sure that you have opened many books and read 2 pages and understood instantly that this person doesn't have the gift.
Yes, sadly. And, and I look
They
at the
can't.
lack of editing in some things and it just makes my heart, I'm a natural editor is what I'm really good at. But, so I kind of get to, and I'm also not a person who plays well with others. That won't surprise you. You're not really either. So,
No.
right. So my friend Sue Grafton used to say that all the time, that she became a writer because she wasn't good at playing well with others. So I like running my own universe
Was
better
she as
than
nice a person as
Oh.
her books suggest?
Absolutely. She was lovely. I mean, she was actually even more wonderful than her books. And we're the same age, and we were the same age. And we had made a pact when she got to M, I think it was, that we would go to Z together. And it just broke my heart that between Y and Z, she got cancer and she died. So I have one of my happiest books up here on my shelf is that she personally inscribed a copy of Y. She didn't do any book signings and all because by then she couldn't, but she did write a lovely inscription inside my copy of Y, which is, the last book that she did. But she was truly remarkable, Donna. You would have very much liked her. She was tough.
I liked her because of the books.
Yeah, well, she was very much like Kinsey. I mean, she wasn't pretentious. She was happy with one little black dress. She very, I don't want to say so much charitable, but she was really interested in, I mean, it wasn't that she wasn't really interested in people. And I think the reason her characters were so vivid was that she was so interested in people. I mean, because we did many events together, and I can remember sitting like at the Arizona Biltmore with her and watching her interact with her fans in kind of a cocktail party, environment. And they all felt that she was personally engaged with them and paying attention. She had that gift of lasering in, on a person. So you felt like you were the whole center of her attention when she did that, which is a real gift.
It's a gift. Yeah. And it can't be faked.
No, it really can't be. It takes a genuine curiosity and empathy that she truly had. So, and I think Guido was like that. I think you've written him as that kind of a person. I mean, he's such a nice man. He's a ruthless and relentless investigator. I mean, he never lets go. He's like a dog with a bone. Once, to use that awful cliche, but he's really. He's kind is what he is. And I think sometimes he regrets having to bring people to justice. It's not always the solution. I mean, he does have a very ethical basis for it, but I think he's sometimes sad that it works out that way.
But he's also willing to close an eye to certain niceties of the law.
Well, 2 books back, you actually let the perp kind of off the hook, and that was a Guido kind of a thing to do, where not all of your books end up with off to the hangman, that kind of
good
investigation. Sometimes the resolution is more complicated than that, or it's resolved within a family or society or something. It isn't necessarily the law that that winds up the investigation. I think that's one reason people are so interested in your books, is that we never quite know what to expect.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, neither do I. No, really, because I don't know what's going to happen.
No. There's there are terrific studies in human nature, and I'm sorry that some Italians don't quite understand that understanding how things work in any country leads to some of the themes you bring out in your book. I mean, you could be Robert Spencer Robert Parker. Spencer's Boston has all kinds of similarities to it. You can't write about any I think, any culture without finding the same kinds of things that Guido faces in Venice or with the rocks. I mean, look at the condition of our own government at the moment. It's far worse than anything you've ever written about Venice.
But there's always Italy, if you want to see chaos government. Just turn your eye on Italy, and there you have it.
Right. Well, it's a remarkable country, and we keep getting back to Rome. What was I looking at today? It's sort of like all roads lead to Rome. It seems like most roads, in fact, somehow or other go back rooted in Rome. I think it was maybe an exhibition in the Wall Street Journal, an art exhibition about Rome or something. It was about Roman landscape painting. I read it yesterday.
Ah, good.
I never even thought about Roman landscape painting. Mostly you think about marble and other things, but I'm trying to remember where this collection is assembled, a somewhat unlikely place. And some of the landscape painting was relatively crude, certainly not sophisticated, but the person who wrote the article pointed out, that it wasn't until the Renaissance that landscape painting really became a focus. It was, excuse me, more religious art and so forth, but the Romans were right in there, looking at the whole world, not just their religious figures. Excuse me. So what you said you've already finished next year's Brunetti?
No, I've got maybe 2/3 of it done. And I'm seriously undecided about whether I should kill someone or not. In fact, I wrote a version in which I killed him. And then I repented of that, so I unkilled him. But now I think I have to go back and kill him, because his death will be of use to me. And I think this is an example of the way I can't speak for other writers, but of the way I view a lot of what goes on in the books. People have to serve my purposes. And so if a person is a wise ass and I sort of like them, but the book isn't supposed to like them, and I have to take out some of their wit so that the reader is not terribly upset by what happens to that person or what that person does. And in this case, the reader needs to understand that the bad guy in the book is really a bad guy. And the only way I can make this clear is by having him kill this person. Because I sit and I think about, well, who else could he kill? And why would he want to kill them? He has a reason to kill the guy I killed already and brought back to life. But I think I have to kill him.
Well, all I can tell you is that I think that the very best, excuse me, crime novels are one where you sincerely mourn the victim.
Yeah. But yeah, that's true.
So if in fact,
I had in my entire time writing, I've had 2 angry letters about death, about killing someone. And they're both from women in England. This was 15, 20 years ago, but I still remember them because they're the only really dissatisfied letters I've ever received. They both said, in this book, blah, 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 how dare you have killed Poppy? And I had to think for myself, God, it's a golden retriever. I've killed children, and I've killed men, and I've killed women, and I've blown people up, and I've stuck knives in them, and I've poisoned them, and I've shot them. But because I gave strychnine to this lovely, beautiful, wide-eyed, tail-wagging golden retriever, 2 people were moved to write and criticize me for that.
I will have you know that an absolute rule in American crime fiction is you can kill anyone but the dog. Anyone but the dog. And it leads to an interesting problem with some authors where dogs are part of the ensemble cast, is that the dog can't age with the people because dogs have so much shorter a lifetime. And so it becomes a real problem if you're, in contemporary
Of
stories
course.
where you're aging the characters, but the dog, the dog is on a whole different track. And,
Well, it has
because,
to be, the detective would have to have a pet parrot because they live about 75 years.
right. But no, it's really true. Don't kill the dog is an absolute rule. So I'm not surprised that you would have had an angry letter about.
Oh, no, they were upset by this. I
Right.
was complimented.
Well, you should be. I mean, you stirred up genuine emotion, but I know Martin Walker. I don't know if you've read any of his Bruno Chief of Police.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember the Basset Hounds? He had an original Basset Hound that we all loved.
Yeah.
And at one point, the Basset Hound becomes heroic and takes a bullet intended for Bruno. And when Martin and I were talking about it, because we've done all of his books together, he said that he had been aging. I'm trying to remember the name of the first. Anyway, he'd been aging the dog, and he suddenly realized that to have the dog die a natural death would be tragic, but to have the dog die a heroic death, protecting Bruno, that it would be acceptable. And and then he's brought another Basset into the thing, and this Basset Hound has mated with a superbly credentialed female Basset Hound, and there are puppies. So he's dealt with this whole problem of the shorter life of dogs in a very clever way, I think.
Very clever. I wouldn't have thought of that. Yeah, they live 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Yeah. So anyway, well, I'm delighted to know that there will be a Brunetti next year when you get around this thorny problem of whether or not to kill this person. And tell me a little bit about the memoir before we call up Jacob. Is this something you've been working on for a long time, or?
No. I wrote a lot of journalism in the earlier years, just because people wanted me, as Donna Leon, a known writer, to write something for a newspaper or for a magazine or for a movie or for I don't know what. And so I did them. And then I immediately, of course, forgot about them. But Diogenes, my publisher here in Switzerland, keeps everything, keeps copies of everything. So about a year ago, my editor there, whom I adore, who is an eagle-eyed editor who finds everything. Donna, on page 17, you said he has blue eyes, and now on page 312, they're green. She said, why don't you publish all of these essays? And I said, yeah, if you'll find them, okay. So she found them, and I re-edited them. And it turns out there's a lot of them about being in Iran, about traveling, about being in China, all manner of things, dealing with the Italian bureaucracy. I was amazed at how many there were. And they put them together under different headings. And Grove is publishing them, I think, in November. And there's an absolutely killer photo on the cover of the American edition, because Diogenes views me perhaps as the great old lady of crime. So there's a very conservative picture of me looking about 127 on the cover. And I said, no. And I didn't bother to look at it because I'm very negligent. I didn't bother to look at the cover photo. And I didn't like it. It was finally published. But anyway, there we are. So I said, yeah, this. I just think that's
gorgeous.
So
I'm getting a little too much light reflecting on it, but you can see when I made my original remarks at the opening of this conversation why I had serious red jacket envy, because it is so gorgeous. It's just a wonderful photo, Donna.
With those Ray-Bans.
Yes, they are too. And I like, the sort of hand in the pocket, slight slouch, crisp white shirt and a structured background there. Architectural background is a wonderful cover. But they're not using this in the European, in the Diogenes edition?
No, I don't even know where that is. I don't think I have one. But I've asked Diogenes to send this photo to the other countries that have bought it. I think the French have, the English have, and they're using it. I don't know what the French are doing. They probably won't. because they think they're the only cool people. I don't know who else is publishing it. Maybe the Dutch. But I would like to make that.
Well, I think it's a gorgeous. I have to
Really
hold it at a slant because otherwise we get a reflection, which I love. So perhaps, love, since I only usually get to talk to you once a year, maybe when this book comes out, I'll get to talk to you
Oh,
again.
do it again. Yeah, we can talk in November.
Which will be wonderful. Yep, it will be. And then we can really talk about opera, which I think will be a lot of fun. And I will tell you about my time. What?
Sorry, I have to give you a tip. If you can, I don't know whether you use Spotify or you still buy CDs. If you see it, if you haven't bought it yet, Handel's Theodora with Joyce, with Oropesa, Lisette Oropesa, Michael Spires, John Chest, and a French countertenor with our conductor, Maxime Emilianichev. It is sublime. It was my present to me. We were talking about 3 years ago, and Giulio, the artistic director, said, well, it's time to do an oratorio of Handel. We've done, I think, 5 operas. And I said, let's do Theodora and see if you can get Joyce to sing Irene, the mezzo part. And Joyce agreed. So we went ahead and did it. I sat at all of the recordings. I went on tour with it. I saw it 5 times. The music of Theodora is so perfect. And the cast is absolutely divine. So get it.
Well, thank you for the tip. I just had my husband replace my Bose CD player because the old one had broken. And he said to me, why do you want one when you can just download it all on your computer? I said, you're missing the point, Rob. I said, I really want to listen to my CDs. I have many, and I don't care if I can play it on my computer. I want to play it on my Bose.
Yeah.
Instead. So I will look for the. I will look.
No, Theodora is just divine. The music is
thank
divine.
you. I'm very fond of Handel anyway in the oratorios. So my Christmas treat to me, although it's sort of almost like pop music, is to go and listen to the Messiah because I can sing the entire thing. I can sing the entire thing. So I go along and it's wonderful. They've done some great productions in Santa Fe too of Santa, and I think I told you I'm going to see Orfeo in July, but of course that's not Handel, but nonetheless.
Yeah, but it's wonderful.
Yeah, it will be absolutely great. So Jacob, come and see if we have any questions from the audience before we geek out once again out of really kind of our excuse for doing this, right?
Hi, Jacob.
Hey, Donna. So
did you get a copy of the book?
Yes, it's right
Thank
here.
you. All right, show us the cover because it really is, I think, actually gorgeous, and it reflects the estate that I was mentioning, next to the convent, which is a very important scenes in the book, and I think is lovely. Thank you. Great. Any questions?
Yep. This one's from Stefania, and I believe Stefania lives in Italy.
She's in Genoa. Hi, Stefania.
Yeah.
Buenos Aires.
And have you had to make a lot of did you do a lot of research to make your stories too accurate as possible? It was harder. Was it harder for you to set locations in another country that you may have not visited?
Oh, it'd be impossible.
Yeah.
But I've lived in Italy for about 35 years.
Right.
So it is the only country I can write about with any accuracy. I couldn't write a book about the United States because I haven't lived there for 50 years. It's a foreign country.
How long have you lived in Switzerland now?
I've been resident here about 15 years, and I've been living now maybe 4 years permanently. But I'm 7 kilometers from the Italian border and 3 hours from Venice.
Right.
So I'm sort of an exile in Switzerland, but I can get there. And on public transportation very quickly.
She also asked, I'm curious, what do you love and hate most about Italy? What made you fall in love with Italy?
I love the instinctive generosity of the people. And if I were ever to have some misfortune fall upon me, I would want it to happen in Italy, because there I would be, even by people who didn't know me, I would be taken care of. People respond to human need with generosity in Italy. And I don't hate anything about it except the fact that they just seem not able to govern themselves, or to find a way to create a government that is legitimate and efficient. But maybe they will. They've been practicing for 2,000 years.
Do you like Italian literature, maybe contemporary or classic? If yes, who are your favorite authors?
I like Sciascia, who's a crime writer. I read some of the poetry, but it doesn't wow me, because I think poetry you always have to read in your own language. And I read some contemporary fiction, but I prefer to read my spoken Italian is fine, but I prefer to read in my mother tongue.
Emily Hood asked, I love reading your reading about the meals Paola makes. I always want a glass of wine while I read them. Are you a good cook like Paola?
No, not like Paola. I'm an okay cook. I wouldn't starve to death in a closed apartment. But Italians grew up with a culinary religion, and I grew up with 2 Irish grandmothers. So culinary is not a word that was in our vocabulary. Yeah, I can cook, and I could cook well for 4 or 5 things, but it's not my art. Luckily, my best friend in Venice is the best cook I know.
Annie Wilkins asks, I've read all of your books, love them. Do you have any plans for Brunetti to go on location?
What does go on location mean?
This was just the question. Do you have any plans to bring back Brunetti, or?
I think she's referring, or whoever this is referring to another television production.
Oh, yeah, we're talking. My lawyer is talking with their lawyer, but I have been asked to the altar. I have been left at the altar twice, and so we'll see what happens. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Would it still be a German production, or would it be? No,
it would be American.
Right. If you've never watched the German, whoever is watching, I'm trying to remember what you can see it on. I've watched all of them, and there was a change of cast somewhere in the middle. Brunetti became a different actor. And they're wonderful for Venice, and they're less wonderful for Patti. Is despite his the conversation that Donna and I have had about him, I've always thought of him as kind of elegant and Italian suits and the whole bit. And the German actor that played Patti in the TV just wasn't Patti at all. Patti, he was kind of short and square, and didn't look elegantly Italian.
Yeah, because Brunetti is always considering the tremendous beauty of the Vice Questore. He's a beautiful man,
Right?
And he dresses beautiful. He's elegant and very well mannered, and so he's charming. He's just a lazy sod.
Yeah, well, he is. He's shallow too. I mean, he is. Lazy, and he's much more
He loves his
political.
wife, and he loves his sons, and he'll do anything for his family.
That's true.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jacob?
Yeah. Do you think the location, like Venice, has a role in your story as much as the character? Do you think the location plays just as much importance in the story for you?
No. I think the location was thrust upon me because when I started to write a book, the only place I'd ever lived was Venice. So the only place I could write about with any accuracy is Venice, and remains Venice. But I think because most people have grown up with the idea that Venice is heaven, the idea that the books are set there makes the books more appealing, because people get to read about Venice as well. And it is the Venice as it appears to Venetians, not to tourists.
And do you have a favorite Baroque composer?
Handel, there's only one. Really,
That's it.
that's it.
Which
Yes.
is the book that takes place mostly in the islands and the waterways outside the city? I can't remember which.
Yeah,
title.
it's,
Is it The Waters of Eternal Youth?
no. It might be Fatal Remedies. No. It's one of the, wait a minute, let me get.
I'm looking at the list of titles here, and I wish I'm terrible on titles.
No, it was maybe 4 books ago.
Okay,
So
so
I carbon date my life.
unto us the Son is given.
No.
Oh,
Earthly Remains.
okay, well, the reason I mention it is that it is Venice, but it has much more to do with the islands and so forth. And I think it's a part of Venice that many people aren't familiar with or don't really think about. And so I really recommend it because it will take you to an aspect of the city that you might not be familiar with. They also go over to Mestre, which is very, very different from Venice. It's a real manufacturing kind of, commercial city.
Yeah.
And it's the closest one to Venice. If you go go from Germany, there's a road, right, that goes
Yeah.
to Mestre.
It goes right up to the bridge.
Right. So again, that, the romantic view of Venice is offset by the sort of, industrial complex of Mestre. But it's also beautiful to go out into the islands. But when I was last in Venice, it was in the summer and it was unbelievably hot and humid. And we spent our time on the Vaporetti to cool off, going out to visit the islands, which was wonderful. I
good
might not
idea.
have done that, but we got to go not just to to Murano, but to Burano for the lace, and then which is the one that has all the beautiful Byzantine mosaics.
Torcello.
Yeah, Torcello. And you can have a wonderful time riding in the Vaporetti all around the waterways around Venice.
Yeah.
Which I don't know that people necessarily think of, but it's remarkable. Anyway, Donna, thank you very much for your time again.
Thank you.
And thank you for this gorgeous book, So Shall You Reap. And we do have autographed copies, which Jacob is holding up. We also have a very few copies coming from London that are still unclaimed, where I'm assuming you actually signed them in person. Would I be right? Right. So I collect on the shelves behind me, my entire rows of Donna Leon books of the British edition, because that's what I started with. So I still do that. And some of you still do that too. They're gorgeous and it's fun. Anyway, so perhaps in September or November, whichever month it is, we'll get to talk about the memoir.
Nice.
Right. So arrivederci.